We're doing another step-by-step guide, but this time in the Deepcool Matrix 40. You want to know how to build a PC step-by-step? Well then follow along right here on Robeytech. What is up, guys, and welcome to another special Deepcool sponsored edition of our step-by-step guides. These are some of my favorite videos to do because we get to walk you, the beautiful, amazing viewer, through the step-by-step process of building a PC. We're talking about Legos on crack, guys, and in the end, you can use it for way more than just playing with your little brother, your son, your daughter. Not to say that that's not awesome, but the point being is that you secretly know you want to Minecraft or Minesweep at those bajillion frames per second. Now remember, this is a full, very long guide, usually sometimes between 45 minutes and an hour long. So down in the description below, there's going to be links, and as well as that cool new YouTube feature is going to let you walk through or relook at parts or repeat parts so you can make sure that you get everything right. Now we're going to try very hard to be as in-depth as humanly possible so you guys can follow along with this video. You are completely capable of building any PC you want, but we chose parts in a PC for this at a budget that's great if you want to follow along and build this exact PC. Anyway, guys, hope this is helpful. Let's go ahead and start walking through the parts we chose and why. We've got the Deepcool Matrix 40. This is the newest micro ATX airflow case from Deepcool. The CPU we're going to be using is the AMD Ryzen 5 5600X. Overall great CPU, budget price. It was my 2020 CPU of the year. Because this is a micro ATX build, we have to use a micro ATX motherboard. So in this case, we're using the B550M Aorus Pro P. For our RAM, we're using G.Skill Triton Z Neo. G.Skill and Corsair have both done AMD-specific versions of RAM, which means that you won't have to worry as much about compatibility, so that's why we chose this specific RAM, which we all know works well with Ryzen. For our GPU, we're using the ROG Strix GeForce RTX 3060 Ti, but this is not something that is necessary. So if you're following along the guide, feel free to do a 3060, 3060 Ti, or 3070. For our storage, we've got our Western Digital Blue SN550. This is a 1 terabyte. This is going to be our OS and probably primary game drive. We're also going to throw in this Vulcan T-Force 1 terabyte 2.5-inch SSD just to show you how to install it. For our fans, we're using MF120 GTs. Again, this is a Deepcool sponsored bit, and love these fans from Deepcool. These are airflow fans, not high static pressure fans, which we are going to be using specifically to generate airflow. For our cooler, we're using the AS500 Plus CPU cooler from Deepcool. Overall, going to have more than enough heat dissipation for our AMD 5600X. Does have the clearance in this case to basically fit. For our power supply, we're using the Deepcool DQ750. Again, this is a 3060, 3060 Ti, 3070 build. You feel free to move around that. 750 watts is more than enough power to basically make sure that we power the GPU that we've selected. And then finally, last bit is we are going to be using Asia Horse power sleeve cable extensions. You do not have to do this, but for $35, if you're going to spend, $1,500, $2,000 on a PC, why not make it look good? So we always use cable extensions. There's a bunch of different options here. Let's go ahead and talk about the parts you're going to need to build the PC next. Let's talk about the tools that we need to build a PC. First and foremost, you need something like a nice big clean area like what I have here. You can use a mod mat like these, which you can pick up on Newegg. If you do it on a kitchen table or just a nice big open area, that's okay. You try and do it not on carpet. Again, it's just to protect from static, ideally like a nice hardwood floor, kitchen floor. If you are going to do it on carpet, just be extra safe about static discharge. We talk about the tools that you need. There's a couple things. Down here on the left-hand side, we have some screwdriver options. I will tell you, just having a standard screwdriver on hand, some cases require or have like small areas that only a standard screwdriver would fit in, so it's always good to have one of these on hand. We also have options like, for instance, things like WOW sticks, or in this case, iFixit kits that make things a little easier for some of the smaller components. And so depending on how serious you are about building, these are always good options. These right here are zip ties, which I always like to use, and these are really for cable management. You also have the option of what are called Velcro ties, which you have right here. I always have a knife on hand. You don't always have a branded knife like I do, but branded knives are always a good thing. This right here is thermal paste and a thermal paste spreader. The cool thing about a thermal paste spreader is you get a nice even spread over the entire IHS, which is just better for heat dissipation if you want to do that. This right here is for cutting our zip ties. So having something like this to be able to cut the extra off. You can also use scissors, but a little tool like this, which you can get at like Home Depot or any hardware store, is really good. Finally, we have our isopropyl alcohol and our paper towels. Like like I said, if you should make a mistake and you need to reapply thermal paste, you need to remove that thermal paste using your paper towels or your alcohol in order to make that better. So this should be everything you should need if you want to do an ideal kind of build. Again, you really can just get by with a screwdriver and a pair of scissors if you really wanted to. So those are all the tools that you need. Now, guess what? We can get started building the PC. We're going to strip the case all the way down and then we're going to walk through the features of the case. Just one quick thing before we get there is this does actually include 3 RGB fans that come standard with the case. Unfortunately, they're non-addressable, and at the same time they also use Molex for the power, which you can daisy chain together, but because we have the option of using the MF120 GTs, we're going to use those instead. That's not to say these aren't great fans or adequately cooling. Again, it's just about making it aesthetically more pleasing, and at the same time also just trying to make sure that we're trying to minimize the amount of power cables we're going to have coming off of the PSU. It's a cost you do not need to incur. These fans are more than good enough to basically do anything from a cooling standpoint within the case, but we're just choosing the option of doing so. So let's go ahead and strip this down, and then we'll walk through the build itself. So I'm going to take this all the way down to the bare necessities. Here we have the completely stripped Matrix 40. Overall, let's just walk through a little bit of what is involved in the case. A couple things. We've got a covered PSU shroud and then support down here at the bottom for some 3.5-inch drives. Up here we have the mounting for both here and here for 2.5-inch SSDs. On the front, we've got support for up to a 280mm radiator. Also at the top, we've also got support for up to a 280mm radiator. And then on the back, we've got the support for a 120mm radiator. And then of course, you've got the same in terms of fans as well. So you can stick 120 fan at the front, 2 140s or 2 120s at the top. You can stick 3 120mm fans at the front or 2 140mm fans at the front as well. So for top panel connectivity, we've got USB 3 and USB 2. It does also look like it has the support for, you can purchase an additional GPU sag bracket, which is always nice. It does not come included with the case. And then on the back, we've got some anti-sag support for our GPU. And then also in the back, you still have about 3/4 inch of space for cable management, which means for the most part, you're gonna be able to hide cables and channel them in a lot of different ways. So for dust filters, we've got 2 dust filters. We've got one at the top and one at the front. And with stuff that you actually get in the case, you've actually got a handful of zip ties, or as the Verge calls them, tweezers. And then you've also got a number of all your screws, your installation screws and stuff like that. So case comes fully loaded, basically good to go there. Again, the only optional part is if you wanted to do the GPU sag bracket. I just wanted to give you an overview of how we're setting up airflow so you have an idea as to the why, not just the how. So the way that we're gonna set this up is, given that we don't have any hard drives down at the bottom, we'll have 2 intake and a single exhaust MF120 GT. This will create, if you were thinking about it, this would potentially create what's called a positive pressure situation, but given the amount of holes and airflow in this case, I'm not necessarily worried about it from there. We'll have plenty of fresh air coming in through the front. It will hit the CPU, then begin to rise, and then of course sucked out almost immediately by the fan at the back. And given that we have 60+ CFM from all of our air, it's gonna be nice and quick going through the case, which means we're gonna keep this thing nice and cool. So let's talk about what you're gonna need out of the motherboard box, given that we're gonna go ahead and start building. First and foremost, you're gonna need your motherboard. If you are using a different motherboard, and even if you're using the same motherboard that we're gonna use, having your motherboard manual handy is always a great thing. Main reason being is it has things like troubleshooting tips. It's also got like where different parts of the motherboard are, which we're gonna walk you through in general. But if you're using a separate motherboard, you're definitely gonna wanna have this. And given we're gonna use a 2.5-inch SATA drive, or if you're using additional external physical drives, you need your SATA cables. And then over here, you'll see this little, small, tiny screw. You're gonna need a couple of these because we're doing an M.2, we only have one out, but definitely check your motherboard box. It could have a standoff, which is what this screws into, that'll go into the motherboard. We'll show those off, but you're gonna need to make sure your M.2 hardware is out. So that's everything you're gonna need. Let's go ahead and walk through what the different parts of the motherboard are. Let's talk through the different parts that are on the motherboard, just so you guys have like an idea if you're building. Again, you can look at your motherboard manual, or you can go back and look at this part in the guide to reference what things are as we walk through it. First and foremost, in the top left-hand corner, we have our EPS CPU power connector. Over in the top right-hand corner, we've got a couple fan headers. These are called PWM fan headers, pulse width modulation. It allows you to basically change the speed of a fan. If it's a 3-pin, that means it'll run at full speed, but that's what this is. The one that's light gray is our CPU fan. It's the only one that if you don't have something plugged into, when you first turn on the PC, your BIOS, which is like the whole thing that kind of controls your computer without the operating system, will actually throw an error. These over here are the addressable RGB and non-addressable RGB, pretty much the most important headers on any motherboard. We have an additional fan header here. This is called, this is for RAM. This is actually dual channel RAM, even though you've got 4 slots. We're gonna show you how to install it for 2 and for 4 here on the show, but I just wanna make sure that we talk a little bit about that. But again, this is dual channel RAM. Down here in the bottom right, you'll actually see what are called SATA connections. We're going to be plugging these in for our 2.5-inch, 3.5-inch hard drives. These are basically the data connections for those drives to the motherboard. Right here we have our ATX 24-pin power supply. This is what powers the other 3/4 of the motherboard. These are your front panel connections. We've got USB 3.2 right here. We've got USB 2 right here. We have another system fan header here. This is called a TPM. What the TPM basically stands for is this is going to allow you to do things like BitLocker, which is encrypt hard drives. A lot of corporations require you to plug these things in. We're then skipping these. These aren't important, but over here we've got 2 more RGB headers, another 12 volt and another 5 volt addressable. And then this is your HD audio, which is going to control all of the audio stuff that you have on your front panel, like your headphones, etc. We have a by 16, a by 8, and a by 4 PCIe connector. This is going to be for your graphics card. This might be for something like a capture card. And then this and this are both M.2 connections. On the back here, this is your I/O panel, and you know, there's a bunch of, I'm not going to walk too crazy into there, but again, you've got tons of different connections for this stuff. But that is pretty much the motherboard and what each of those connections does, hopefully giving you a little bit of clarity as we plug things in during the build. And again, feel free to reference this, but let's go ahead and start building now. So the first thing we're going to be plugging in is our Ryzen 5 5600X. First thing we're going to do is you're going to see this little tension arm right here. Take it from here at the bottom and then take it to 90 degrees and then leave it like that. And then when you open your CPU, just basically open it up. You're going to grab it from the sides along with just touching the PCB. Try not to touch the top, which is called the IHS. You're going to see a little arrow right here in the top left-hand corner. What you're going to do is you're going to take that little arrow. There's another arrow on the socket right here. Just put it in like so, wiggle it just to make sure it's in, and you're going to pull this down and click it in. There you go. It is good to go. Okay, so next up we're going to talk about doing a RAM, and I talked a little bit about this earlier on, but I'm going to show you basically how to install the RAM, both if you only have 2 DIMMs or if you have 4 DIMMs. Now in 2 DIMMs, down here there's actually a little guide, and if it's not there on your motherboard, it'll be inside of your motherboard box. One thing I will say is that not every motherboard will have both of these little clips work. Some, this will be locked in, etc. So that could be a little bit different. The way that you basically insert your RAM is what you're going to do is you're going to see a little slot here on what's called the printed circuit board, the PCB. You're going to look for that little slot, and there's a little slot here as well. What you want to do is you just want to line that little slot, push it in, and then don't be afraid about this. Taking your thumb at both sides, applying equal pressure, press, and you'll hear a nice solid click. That's how you know it's seated, and then you can double check that it's plugged in like that. Same thing with the second one. Again, line up the PCB, pop it in just like that, and then again, apply even pressure, and you'll get that nice solid click. Now, if you're only gonna install 2 DIMMs, this is where you would place them on this motherboard. In most motherboards, this is going to work in 99% of cases, but again, check your motherboard page for what this looks like, because it will show you how to put the RAM in what slot it goes into. But now we're just gonna go ahead and install the other 2 DIMMs. For the M.2, because we're only installing 1, what we're going to do is we're just going to show you how to do that for the one we're going to do, and we're going to use this one at the top part. So what you do is unscrew this, pull this out. Now, we've used this motherboard before, but if you have a new one, there's actually a peel you need to do here, but you're going to see a little slot right there. It's going to line it up like so, pop it in, push it down, and they're going to take that little tiny screw that you took out of your motherboard box. You're going to pop it down, screw that in like that. Then you're gonna do the same thing with this one. Again, just slide it in like that. That's gonna cover it. Then take your little screw, pop it down, and your motherboard is ready. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna install our cooler. I know this may look complicated, but this is all the stuff that you need to install your Deepcool AS500 Plus. So this is the actual AS500 Plus unit. It's got 2 fans that are already attached to it. We'll be removing these to basically make sure that we can actually mount this to the hardware. Inside, you're gonna see a bag that's like this. This is actually the AMD mounting material that you'll need to mount this to our motherboard. And then inside of a separate bag are these 4 little top screws. You're gonna need to grab these 2. They basically look just like this, so pretty straightforward. Inside there's also, there's 2 ways to control the RGB for this particular unit. One is, and you have to make a decision in terms of what you wanna do, we're gonna be using the motherboard to control all of our RGB. If you don't wanna do that and you wanna actually use this like little external controller, these are the 2 options you have. This one plugs directly to the motherboard, and this one you can actually just control via this little controller. The other thing it comes with is a little fan splitter, because we have 2 fans. These are gonna both plug into the CPU fan header, so that's what this is for. This does not come with pre-applied thermal paste, so it actually does come with included thermal paste. We'll show you how to do the application for this. First thing we're gonna do is apply thermal paste, and then we'll walk through everything else. All you're gonna do is you're gonna take your thermal paste, you're gonna put like a pea-sized amount of thermal paste, or a rice grain amount of thermal paste, in the center of your CPU, like so. Even though this will push and go across the entire top, if you want to just make sure you have a thin layer that makes sure that you cover the entire IHS, which is for like ideal transfer, you can use a thermal paste spreader and do it yourself. In this case, I'm going to use a thermal paste spreader and just spread this out real quick. So now we have our thermal paste applied. What we're going to do is go ahead and get our brackets installed. Okay, so for these, the way these work is there's a little bit on the other end. You see the black end. The black bit goes down, and then it just screws over the top onto this little bracket, like so. Do that on all 4 of these. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna take these, put these over into the front 2, it'll say slot, there's like a C and a D. It's gonna go into D in this case, just like that. What we're gonna do is you're gonna take those 4 little screw tops that I told you about, and you're gonna screw those down over each one of these. And make sure these are nice and tight. So finger tight, and then do like a twist or 2 with the screwdriver. The main reason for that is just to make sure that they're solidly all the way down. Just like that. You're not over tightening, just know when it stops, essentially. There you go, there you go. Now, our bracket's installed. So next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna remove the fans for this. You can see that there's little clips and they clip onto the edges. What we're gonna do is kind of pull. Okay, we'll start for this side. Pull and kind of lift up, and it'll loosen it out like that. Same thing with your other side. Use your thumb, gotta be strong. Sometimes you gotta turn it over. There you go, strong thumbs. Same thing on the other side, it should just come out. There you go. There's that one, and then that one. And then at the very bottom, don't forget this, there's a peel. Make sure you peel that off, like so. All I'm gonna do is make sure the cable's on the right-hand side. You can mount this in either direction, but again, for cable management, I know this is what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna set this down like this, lining these little screw holes up. Then start screwing it down, alternating between each side. The way the fans work, and you can actually see this, is there's arrows. And the way we want the air to work is from here through here. So we want to make sure that our arrows, this is our exhaust, and again, it's pointing that it's exhaust, so you make sure the air goes out, the back goes out, and you're gonna put this one on this side, first untwisty. You're gonna take your clip, line it up, and then take your clip and clip it on that side. Same thing, clip like that. So there's one. Do the same thing with this one, untwisty tie. Then you can see the arrow for this one. This is gonna be intake, so it's gonna pull air into it. So make sure your fan is at the bottom. Clip, other side, hold, and clip. And there you go. Now our cooler's installed. Last bit is down here in the back. You've actually got 2 fans. You take your fan splitter, your CPU fan, it's the light gray one. You simply plug this in, and we're zooming in, showing you how to plug in a 4-pin fan header. Plug it in just like that, and then what you're gonna do is you're gonna take these 2 fans, you're gonna plug these in to these 2 slots, like so. There's 1, and there's 2. Just like that. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cable manage it and hide it. Okay, so what I've done is if I lift this up, you can see I've now got a bundle of cables that I've now pushed into this little area. It's completely covered. So when you look at the case straight on, you look at the motherboard straight on, you cannot see the cables. This one's gonna be for our RGB, which we're gonna hook in later. But right now, as you can see, I've got everything basically hidden, and now we can put this inside of our case. Okay, so these are 3 MF120 GTs. We got these out of a 3-pack that we showed you a little bit earlier. The only thing, because we're using Deep Cool and the AS500 Plus, we actually don't need that much out of the box for this. What we need is we need the 3 fans. This is our RGB hub, which our AS500 will also plug into. And then we'll also be using our fan hub just to make it a little bit easier to control our fans, given this is a micro ATX. The last thing is that you also, for this part, are gonna need all of the fan screws. These are the fan screws I used when I unscrewed all of the RF120 FSs that came with the case. So that's where I got these. So you don't need to take anything else from the MF120 GT box. So I'm gonna set this stuff aside, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna install the front 2 fans, and then once we put the motherboard in, we'll install the last one. So the way that we're gonna place these, so what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your fan cables, and there's a little hole up at the top here. Run this, just like that, and we're gonna put this up at the about as high as it can go. You wanna give it some pressure. We're gonna run the cables through the bottom of the cage here, off to the side, and you're just gonna line that one up right here, pushing all the way against the other one, and then I use. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna flip this over and get our motherboard installed. Okay, so for motherboard installation, what you're gonna do is just kind of grab it from the IO shield and then the back, kind of set it in, and then kind of push it until it lines up with the holes on the case, just like so. There you go, pretty straightforward. So we've just got our motherboard in, but there's one thing before we screw it down that we need to do that's unique to this particular case. We actually, the way that these protectors work is you actually have to pop them out. So what we're gonna do is we're looking at our PCI lane, and we're seeing which 2, because we know this is a 2-slot card, which 2 we need to remove. This one and this one from the PC case. So now that we've got that in, unfortunately now we have to take it out, like so. We're gonna remove this thumb screw. I'm gonna pop these 2 middle ones out. And the way you do that is just move them back and forth, like so. Now we're going to rinse and repeat. Grab our motherboard, pop it in, line up the holes, like that. Now what you're gonna do is grab your motherboard screws. You're looking for the ones that have little lips around the edge just like this. And then you're gonna screw in 8 total screws to make sure this is secured in. Now, one thing that is something that you guys should be aware of when doing this case is that, remember I talked about this 2 SSD mounts. Now, if you're gonna, I'm planning on installing my SSD right here, which I have screwdrivers to be able to plug that in, to screw that in, no issue whatsoever. But there's also an SSD mount on and behind the motherboard. If you are going to be putting your SSD there, Make sure that you install that before putting your motherboard down, because there is no other way to do it. And so just wanted to give you a heads up there if that's something that you're going to do. Now that you're at the spot, it's a great place to be able to take this apart and put that in there. So yeah, now we're good to go here. What we're going to do is let's go ahead and install our exhaust fan, and then we'll install our SSD, and then we'll turn over and do cable management. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to install our SSD. Now, to install the SSD, the physical 2.5-inch SSD, again, you're using the actual same exact screws that you used when mounting the motherboard. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be placing this here with the screw holes facing down. I mean, with all of the connectivity facing down. Then on the front here, and again, you're going to put a screw in every corner here. Okay, so we've got our SSD mounted, and I'll show you on the other side as well. One of the things is that I will let you know, if you don't have, like we use a very, very small screwdriver, you might see in the case where your screwdriver may not fit in there as well as this one did, and in that case, you may have to actually, unfortunately, remove the fans to put that in. So order of operations might change a little bit, but again, we were able to do it just because of the tools that we had. You can see that our SSD is plugged in, and now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and run all of our spare stuff, get all of our fans and stuff hooked in and hooked up, and then we'll run all of our front panel connections. We're going to do a little time lapse and come back and talk about what I did. Okay, so now we have the initial cable management done, which is like all of our fans plugged in. We've shown you here how to plug in a fan. It plugs in the same way. Just make sure that that lip is in the correct spot. And then right here, we're showing you how to connect your RGB to this RGB hub. Feel free to move these around. Again, this is just so I can have a clean look to it. Next thing I'm going to do is we're going to hook up our front panels. But in order to do that, we do need to add our RGB control. So what we're doing is we're taking this, and it's got basically these two connections. What we're going to do is connect this together like this. And now what we're going to do is run all our front panels. USB 3. This is going to go right down here in this bottom slot right here, like that. Next thing we're going to take is our HD audio, which is labeled HD audio on the bottom. I'm going to stick that into this slot on the right hand side, right like that. Then we're going to take our USB 2. We're going to stick this into the same place we stuck the USB 3. Just like this. We're going to take our front panel connections, which in this case is HDD, power switch, and reset switch. And these are going to go right here in the front slot right here, just like that. And then what we're going to take is our fan header, one. And we're going to put this into the front slot just like this as well. And then we're going to take our RGB header. You're going to take the one that says ASUS, ASRock, and MSI. Even though this is a gigabyte board, you're going to take the ASUS, ASRock, MSI, and you're going to put that right here, like so. Okay, and then now all our front panels are on the other side. Let's get them hooked up. We're going to take our hard drive light, the HDD light, and this is going to go in this bottom left slot right here, just like that. And then we're going to take our reset switch, which is right here. And you're going to take this one, and this is going to go into the one next to the hard drive, like this. And then you're going to take your power switch, and it goes right above the reset switch, like that. And you're just going to push your extra cables down in there. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our USB 2, and the USB 2 one is going to get plugged in right next to this, right here. We're going to take our fan header and plug that one over here next to the USB a little further away. Push that through. And the last one we're going to do is our USB 3.2, which you're going to see right here. Now remember, guys, the big thing here is making sure you're at a 90-degree angle when you plug this in. You do not want to bend pins. Line it up and then push it in. And it'll click nicely. And there you go, that's all plugged in. Now over on the other side, we're going to take our our RGB. We're showing you a zoom into this right here, and you're gonna plug this in. Push that cable through, and then finally HD audio. Again, pinned only one way. Makes it really easy to plug in. Plug it in just like that. We have our front panel connections, which is your power switch, hard drive light, and stuff from up here. Next one, you've got your USB 3.2, which is also from up here. That's your front panel USB 3.2. You've got your USB 2, which also is doing from your front panel. You've got your fan headers, which plugs that fan hub that's in the very back. Over here, you've got your RGB, which controls all the RGB in this entire case. And then finally, you've got your HD audio down here in the bottom left-hand corner, which is also for your front panel 8 audio connections here in the front. So there, everything is plugged in on the other side. Let's turn this over, do a little bit more cable management, and then we're gonna install our GPU, install our PSU, and then we'll be done. Okay, so we've got all our cable management done. We got a couple more things to plug in here in just a few seconds, but what you essentially see that I've done is I've created channels, and then even then, like using the natural like kind of flow of the cables is really kind of the whole thing to just kind of keep them channeled and then all together. And I try to keep things in 90-degree angles just because it ends up looking a bit nicer and a bit cleaner, but this is what this is kind of how we want to end up. Last cable we're gonna hook up real quick before we move on to our GPU is our hard drive cable. You're gonna need this from your motherboard. We showed this a little bit earlier. I have a tendency to use these. There's a little L on here, and that aligns with the little L on the hard drive. What you're gonna do is take that and plug it in just like that. You're gonna take this, you're gonna put it in down here. We're gonna flip it over like this. Take this and plug it in into the first one like that. And then just cable manage this one little bit. And ready to go. So let's flip this over and get our GPU installed. So here we have our ROG Strix 3060 Ti. Again, you can switch this out to any 3060, 3060 Ti, 3070 specifically in this build. Now, before you throw your GPU in here, remember we took this little bracket out. What you wanna do is you wanna put that bracket back in like this and screw it in. Tighten it down so you have room to stick the GPU under. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our GPU, like so. Line it up like this. And then you're gonna click it in. We're showing you the click that you're gonna listen for. We're gonna have to kind of place the screw, line it up and screw it in. And then you screw this in, and this will also clamp down. Just like that. So next up, what we're gonna do, and again, this is an optional step. If you're gonna just do the PSU, all you're gonna do is skip the step of connecting the PSU cables into the cable extensions. But again, we do this because if you're gonna spend this kind of money on a PC, you wanna overall make sure it looks good. So here we have some Asia Horse cable extensions. So first one is our 24 pin. It's gonna take this, it plugs in right here. You're seeing a zoom in of how to plug in a 24 pin ATX power connection. We're gonna take our cable and run it through this top slot right here, just like so. We'll figure out how to run that later. Next thing we're gonna take is our CPU. It's gonna go in the top right or top left. Learn your left from your right there, Robes. Top left. Plug in right here. You're seeing a zoom into that connection as well. Pretty easy to plug in. Pull that one down so the comb's just kind of there. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pop this up like this. Pop this up like this. Okay, and then we're gonna run both of these through into the back here. All of our cable extensions are hooked up. Flip this over. And now we kind of get things placed. So what we're gonna do now is drop in our PSU and then finish our cable management. So grab our PSU. Okay, so the cables you're gonna need out of your drive, or sorry, out of that bag is, you'll need your 24 pin ATX. So you'll need 2 of these PCIe power cables. You'll know them because they split into 3 pin and a 4 pin that connect together. So you'll need 2 of those. You'll need SATA, this is for our single hard drive. You'll know it because it's got the little L, it looks flat like that. And the last one you'll need is CPU, and it's literally labeled CPU in this case. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna plug this into our PSU. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take our PSU motherboard one. Top one's gonna go here. Like that, and then flip it up. The bottom one is gonna go right here underneath. So there's our motherboard. And then there's another slot labeled CPU. We're gonna take CPU and picking the part that's not labeled CPU, the unlabeled part, plug that into the CPU. Like that. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our two VGA PCI ones, the parts that are split do not get plugged in. So you're gonna take these and plug one into there and one into the top. Then the last one is you're gonna take is your SATA, and it says SATA and Molex. We're just gonna plug this into the top left one, like so. Take this giant rat's nest of cables. We're gonna slowly but surely, there it goes. Pull your other cables up afterwards. Okay, so there, you've got that stuck in. Lift this up. The PSU fan is pointed down towards the ground, so that is one thing that's important as well that is worth mentioning, is that the PSU fan is actually on the bottom and not on the top. So make sure that the fan goes down as you're placing it in. Last screws of the build. Knock our table. And screw these in. There we go, now our PSU is installed. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take our one that's labeled CPU. It's literally labeled, it says CPU. We're gonna take this one and plug it in right here. Like that. Kind of stick that down, and we'll worry about cable management here in a minute. So get that one done. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our motherboard one. Take this one and you're gonna plug this in to this big giant one right here, just like this. There we go. There's our motherboard. Then you're gonna take your two VGA, and I have a tendency to do the parts that are not like the front part of it, not the additional split. I'm gonna take this and plug this in right here. And also take this other one and plug this in right here. Okay, and then the last one, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this SATA connection, again, it's a little L, and there's a little L on the hard drive. You're just gonna plug that in right like that. And it's a little bit awkward, but it will plug in, just like that. Okay, now I'm gonna do is take the time and go ahead and get our cable management done. So now we've got all of our front stuff done, everything's cable managed, so what we're gonna do is go and put our back on. Our top dust filter, like so. Our front panel. And now we plug it in. It's a good sign. And there we go, guys. We have a completely set up and finished Deepcool Matrix 40. All in all, guys, I hope this was helpful. I hope that you're at the exact same spot that we're at. I am super curious, is there anything inside of this build that, inside of this guide, that you felt like needed more detail? Is there something that wasn't quite clearly done? Is there things that we could do to improve? Because we'd love to do these and more of these in the future. These are some of our most popular videos all up. And we hope you've been able to move around and that the table of contents and all that stuff was helpful. So let us all know about all of that stuff in the comments below. Now, while you're down there, make sure you slap that subscribe button, whip that like button, and ring a notification bell so you get a notification each and every time that we go live or post a new video right here on Robeytech. Now, speaking of live, we also have a live show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday starting at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time, where you can check us out on Twitch, YouTube, or even on Facebook. And also, if you want to follow us and know more about us, you can check us out on all the socials. And we even have our brand new YouTube short channel, Robeytech Shorts, where you can see the same content we post on TikTok, but also on YouTube. Anyway, guys, super appreciate the support of Deepcool in sponsoring this video, and we're super excited and hope to see you on our next video coming up very soon.